In the world of Know Your Customer, or KYC, some entities just feel like a safe bet. They get slapped with that lower risk label, and honestly, it's pretty easy to let your guard down. So today, we're going to put two of the biggest ones under the microscope: publicly listed companies and regulated financial institutions. We're going to figure out if that low risk label is a genuinely helpful shortcut or a really dangerous assumption.
And that brings us right to the heart of it, doesn't it? When we say an entity is lower risk, are we subconsciously hearing no risk? Because as we're about to find out, that tiny little shift in thinking can be a massive, and I mean massively expensive mistake in the compliance world.
So, here's what we've got on tap. First, we'll bust open this whole low-risk myth. Then, we'll do a deep dive into public companies, and after that, financial institutions. We'll walk through a super common, tricky scenario with a private subsidiary, give you a practical checklist, and then wrap it all up with a quick knowledge check to make sure the important stuff really sticks.
All right, Section 1, the low-risk myth. To really get why this myth is so pervasive, we need to talk about a core concept in KYC called simplified due diligence.
This right here, this is basically the origin story of the myth. It all comes down to something called simplified due diligence, or SDD. Now, this is the fast lane of KYC, right? It's a less intense process for clients that are seen as posing a very low risk. And guess who the poster children for STD are? Yep, publicly listed companies and regulated financial institutions. This is exactly where they get that low-risk reputation.
So, let's tackle our first example: publicly listed companies. On the surface, they look like an open book. They seem like a compliance officer's dream come true. But we're about to find out exactly where that transparency hits a wall.
And look, it's easy to see why we think they're so safe. These companies are living life under a huge spotlight. They've got regulators and stock exchanges breathing down their necks. They have to constantly disclose anything that might affect their stock price. And a big one, they're required to name their major shareholders. We're often talking about anyone who owns more than 5% of the company. It really creates this powerful illusion that everything you need to know is just right there for the taking.
So you gotta ask, right? With all this information out in the open, with all this transparency, what could you possibly be missing? What's left to find?
And here it is. This is the critical piece of the puzzle. Transparency is not verification. Just because they tell you who owns 5% doesn't mean your job is done. Your job is to find the ultimate beneficial owner, the UBO. That's the actual human being at the end of the chain who really owns or controls the company. And the magic number you're often looking for is 25% ownership. On top of that, you still have to identify and check out every single director and key executive. And then you have to screen all of those people against sanctions lists and watch lists for politically exposed persons. That public data, it's just the starting line, it's not the finish.
Okay, let's move on to our second entity: regulated financial institutions. Now, if public companies are trusted because they're transparent, these guys are trusted because they're watched. The motto here is an old one, but a good one: trust, but verify. The trust factor here is huge, and you can see why. These places are supervised by big-time government and regulatory bodies. They have to play by the same tough anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing rules that you do. So the thinking is, hey, they've got their own robust compliance programs, they're part of the club, they get it.
But, and this is probably the most important thing I'll say about financial institutions, you cannot just take their word for it. Their regulated status is a fantastic risk mitigant, no doubt about it. But it is not a given. It's a claim that you as the analyst have to go out and actively prove.
And the process is actually pretty straightforward. First, you verify their license. This means going straight to the source, the regulator's own website or database, and confirming they're legit and in good standing. Second, check their report card. Have they been fined before? Are there any public black marks on their compliance record? And third, just like with the public companies, you still have to dig in and find the ultimate beneficial owners, those people with significant control, usually over that 25% line.
Okay, time to make this super practical with a mini case study. Now, this is a classic trap, and even seasoned pros can fall into it. Let's talk about the private subsidiary that's owned by a very public, very well-known parent company. This slide just lays out the trap so perfectly. Over on one side, you got the parent company. It's publicly listed, super transparent, a slam dunk for simplified due diligence. But wait, your client is the subsidiary over on the other side. It's a private company. It has zero public disclosure rules. Its ownership structure could be a total mystery. Its risk profile is a complete blank slate. The parent's shiny low-risk status doesn't protect the subsidiary at all. It needs its own full-blown customer due diligence starting right from square one.
So the key takeaway here is simple, but it is so important.
A parent company's transparency and good reputation do not automatically trickle down to its private subsidiaries. Every single company is its own legal entity, and you have to assess it completely on its own merits with its own investigation.
So let's pull all this together. It's time to put these two lower-risk entities side by side and create a clear, simple checklist of what you absolutely need to verify for each one.
This comparison is just so useful. So for key documents with a public company, you're looking at regulatory filings and annual reports. But for a financial institution, the golden ticket is that specific regulatory license. For ownership, with a public company, you'll see those 5% shareholders, but you're still hunting for the 25% UBOs. For an FI, you go straight for those 25% UBOs and you add that extra crucial layer of screening for political exposure. And finally, for ongoing monitoring, with one, you're tracking changes in big shareholders and directors. With the other, you are laser-focused on any change to their regulatory status or sanctions hits.
Okay, we have covered a ton of ground. Let's wrap up with a quick knowledge check, just to make sure we're all on the same page. I'll ask the question, you think about the answer.
First one, why is lower risk a much better term than no risk when we're talking about publicly listed companies? Well, it's because even with all that transparency, you still have the absolutely critical job of identifying and verifying the real people pulling the strings, the UBOs, the directors, and the key executives.
Next up, what's the very first, most critical step you need to take when you're doing KYC on a regulated financial institution? You've got to go straight to the source. You have to independently verify its regulatory license and make sure it's in good standing with the authority that issued it. You can't just take their word for it.
Question 3, a quick numbers check. What's that typical ownership percentage that triggers the need to identify an ultimate beneficial owner? That key threshold we keep talking about? It's 25% or more of ownership or control in many places around the world.
All right, let's go back to our case study. Why can't you just copy and paste the low-risk status of a public parent onto its private subsidiary? Because they are totally separate legal entities. That subsidiary doesn't have the public transparency of its parent, which means it carries its own, completely separate and totally unverified risk profile.
And for our last question, beyond the owners, what other key people in a public company do you have to identify and screen? You've got to identify and verify all the directors and the key executives, basically anyone in a position to actually control what the company does.
We'll leave you with this final thought. In compliance, and especially in KYC, assumption is the mother of all mistakes. It's the easy road and it leads straight to massive risk. The only antidote, the only way to truly know your customer is active, diligent, and ongoing verification. Thanks for joining me.